Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Your Handmade Business Television. That's why HBTV. It is a weekly series dedicated to helping you navigate all things #MakerLife. I am Isaac Watson, co-director of Academy of Handmade, a supportive community for makers. And you may notice that there's somebody missing here today. My crafty co-conspirator is conspicuously absent. That's Sharon Fain, but she is not fully absent. She's around in the chat. Handling that today. We just decided that with our guests on today that it would be easier if we just had one of us facilitating the conversation. So everybody say hi to Sharon and introduce yourselves in the chat. We would love to know who you are, where you're from, and what you make. If you are new to Crowdcast, on the right side of your screen, you will see a chat area where you can converse with the other attendees. You can, if you are watching us through the Facebook feed, we're glad you're watching us. But all the fun is over here on Crowdcast. This is where you get to interact with us directly. So click the link in the post and head over this way. You can ask a question in Crowdcast by clicking the Ask a Question button at the bottom of the video below me here. And we will take questions at the end for our guests, so that you can get a little specific with what's on your mind for today's topic. Speaking of today's topic, we are talking about the process of going from making to manufacturing. And I'm really excited to bring our guests on. As Sharon and I were just at Craftcation conference last week, doing a lot of think tanks, which are these group feedback sessions, kind of roundtable things. And we had several questions come up around production and going into moving a maker business into a larger production scale. And sometimes that means bringing on production help. Sometimes that means going outsourcing entirely and doing manufacturing, which is what we're going to talk about today. And sorry, I'm just checking something real quick. So we're going to have some fun. I'm really excited to have this conversation. These are two people that I have known for a few years now and have worked with on a number of projects. So let's bring them up. All right, Sara and Dana are here from Spooltown.
Hi.
Spooltown. Hello. Spooltown is a small-run sewing factory in Portland, Oregon, specializing in handbags and accessories. They excel at working with unforgiving fabrics like leather, faux leather, and waxed canvas. And as they like to say, needle holes are forever, so you've got to get it right the first time. Sara and Dana run production for many established brands, emphasizing rigorous quality standards, communication, and lasting relationships. They offer design consulting and product development as needed to make manufacturing more affordable in the long run. And they believe in visible, ethical manufacturing and are proud to employ 10 full-time staff a living wage. Now, quick side note, Portland recently set out a goal to hit a $15 an hour minimum wage in a few years. And Sara and Dana were just telling me in the green room that they are eager to hit that goal with their employees before the deadline hits. They are super advocates of that and are embracing it, which is great to hear. So before we get into our questions, I do want to call attention to our poll. Down below the video, you'll see a poll button, and we would like to know if you have ever considered outsourcing any part of your making and manufacturing. There are a couple options in there for you to choose from. Go ahead and click over to that. It won't leave the video. It'll just pop up in front, and you can answer the question, and then we'll revisit the response because I'm curious to see where people stand on that. So, Dara and Sana.
Insana.
Dara and Dana, hello. Thank you for joining us today.
Hi, everybody.
All right. So first of all, I would love for you to tell the group here what your origin story is for Spooltown and what it is that makes your facility unique.
Sure. You want to start?
No, go for it.
Okay. So we started Spooltown in 2011, and both Dana and I worked for a small handbag maker in Portland, Queen Bee, for those of you who know Queen Bee. We both worked for Queen Bee for 5+ years, and managing a number of different aspects of their operations. And during the time that we worked there, there were lots of people that contacted Queen Bee about doing production for them, for their own businesses. And it was not something that really ever worked for Queen Bee's business model. But as time went on, we sort of wondered whether that would make sense to do as a separate business. And so in 2011, we took the lead back. I actually started Spooltown, and Dana came on shortly after and started Spooltown. We started Spooltown working with Queen Bee as a client and within their space, and then grew outside of that and quickly needed a space that was bigger. We moved into our own facility, and we started buying machines and hiring people and taking on more clients, and grew from there. You want to add anything to that?
So it's been a slippery slope ever since.
Wild ride.
No, I think that's it. We did manufacturing for a long time. She's a good friend of ours. And she has recently taken in most of the manufacturing of her own goods back in-house, which is great to see. All things cycle through, which I think is probably relevant to this conversation, is you can't off-board something and then reboard it right back too. So it's been a great relationship.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about why you chose accessories and goods that have difficult materials. Was that a product of your start from Queen Bee, or did you deliberately choose that niche?
Well, there was kind of there were people in Portland who were working on apparel, and it wasn't something that either of us had experience working with anyway. And really, sewing with wovens is very different than sewing with knits. And so we knew wovens and leather and decided to go from there. And kind of as a side note, my dad owned a leather shop on the East Coast when I was a kid and made mostly motorcycle racing jackets and suits. And so that was kind of my background knowledge, was in leather, which is about as unforgiving as it gets.
Yeah. I think for both of us, it was more of a natural transition from the experience that we had working with Rebecca at Queen Bee into bags and accessories than apparel. That's not, and frankly, it's just not what our interest is. My personal interest was. I doubt it was yours. I mean, clearly we're fashion moguls. So
what are you talking about? I'm like a hoodie connoisseur.
It made sense.
Well, so if you aren't any longer working with Queen Bee, who are some of the clients that you work with?
Yeah, so we do all the manufacturing for Glad Rags, and those are washable menstrual pads. For those of you who don't know them, they've been in business like 25 years at this point. So we make tons and tons of stuff for them. And then we work with lots of other small designers doing their goods. So some of those are non-perishable goods. We make the linen napkins that are absolutely lovely that they do. And Scout and Catalog out of Canada, Appointed out of Washington, D.C. We do some work for Moore and Giles. And then we also do lots of big projects from the products that we've designed in-house. And so some of those are like for Powell's, we make lots of totes for them. We do things for new seasons here in Portland. We work with Design Week Portland and Travel Portland to produce things that kind of go all over the world, advocating for Portland and trying to get more people interested in Portland.
And as you might imagine, being in Portland, there's the monolithic businesses of Nike and Adidas and Columbia and Danner Boots and all of those. And we have done work for all of them. We're not on like a steady retainer with any of them. Their projects are always like immediately right now cost a fortune or cost nothing. So we haven't really delved too deep into that by design. We also work with a lot of clients across the US that we sign NDAs with as a private label manufacturer that we won't and can't name. So there's also that. There's a long list of people, but those are some highlights that we can talk about.
Yeah. And I can add that I've worked with you on a couple projects now for events that I help produce, doing swag items, just kind of one-off projects. That's not super steady business for you, but we did a DOP kit last year, and we're working on another top secret thing that I can't tell you about right now because we didn't sign an NDA, but I'm just telling you right now it's under NDA.
Don't bring it up. Noted.
Okay, so one of the things that comes up is we talk to a lot of makers about the idea of manufacturing, and I think it's probably on the top of a lot of their minds is this idea that going into manufacturing is all or nothing. You're either outsourcing it all or you're doing it all yourself. It sounds to me like there's a gray area. Could you describe kind of what those gray areas are and some of the things that you do help makers with that isn't taking it all on yourself?
Sure. I mean, from my perspective, one of the things that's the easiest to hand off or just frankly pay for help for is sourcing, right? So you're paying a retail price point of what you have Googled and found online for a wax canvas or a textile or nylon or whatever, but often a manufacturer will have a link into a distributor channel, a wholesale channel, or maybe even direct from mill. That's an easy place. Design help is always an option, just to come in and have not necessarily in our shop, in a lot of shops, you can have a prototype or a sample made, like a review of your product. Is this being made efficiently? Is it the best price point that I could be asking for it? We do cutting as a standalone service sometimes. Like people, you start off and you have to find a way to have this stuff cut, but a lot of people are doing it at home on their kitchen table with it.
Cutting is the worst.
It's kind of the worst because you never have enough room. You're dealing with bolts or you're dealing with rolls or whatever. But at the end of the day, we have a robotic table that's 24 feet long that can cut 7 yards, 5 layers deep, depending on what it is. So.
And I will also add to that first and foremost, we're a factory. And so we want to be doing production sewing for people. And for most of the handmade businesses that we've started out working out with, it's made the most sense for them to take one chunk and not do all of their business at one time. So sometimes it's the most popular product that they produce. And some wholesale customer has just contacted them and asked if they will send them 400 of this one bag. And they're like, how am I going to make 400 of these myself? And then that's the point at which I think it makes sense to a factory, is when your volume out of any one particular item outstrips your ability to produce it yourself.
Yeah. It's a great idea to start with a single SKU, right?
Yeah.
Just to get rid of the one thing that causes you the most pain, but is like, maybe it's a bread and butter item. Maybe it's like the standard seller, but you're so sick of it. That's when you're ready to stop making that one thing because you hate it so much. Hire somebody else to do
it. So as you two and I have talked over the years, I know that a lot of makers approach you about either doing work for them or approach you with questions about manufacturing. What would you say is the most common question that you get from them, and what's the answer?
Right. This is tricky. These are trick questions.
I know. There's so many of them. I mean, I think, one of them is, how much would you charge to make this idea that I have? And that kind of brings up a whole other can of worms, which is also like, do I really have to pay for product development work in order to figure out what the final price of something is going to be? Why can't I just move directly into production? Why does there have to be this product development sampling phase that happens before production? And then otherwise, will you sign my non-disclosure agreement? Is another one that comes up pretty frequently.
That might be number one. Yeah, number one is, will you sign my NDA? Number two is, why do I have to pay for product development and sampling? Those two are like neck and neck all the time.
And the answers to both of to the non-disclosure agreement one is generally no. And that is because sorry, I'm like such a straight shooter. I'm like dream squasher central.
We warned you.
I know, right? I think that after doing this for, how long have we been doing this now? 7 years. After doing this for 7 years, we've seen a zillion different ideas that people have. And there are very, very few ideas that are truly proprietary, that are like patentable and, that are truly a proprietary idea. Those kinds of things really necessitate an NDA. And those kinds of things, we're like, okay, great, we'll sign your NDA. When, I don't know, some big company calls us and is like, I'm developing this totally proprietary thing that I want to make this thing to fit it. And we say, sure, we'll do that. And we won't talk about what that is. But the truth of the matter is, mostly a tote bag is a tote bag. And so there is no NDA that is truly going to protect you from that. And it's a tricky balance. Like, ultimately, you need to find a manufacturer who you can trust and you can have a good, amicable relationship with. And that is really difficult to do without some understanding that your information is going to be protected. But I think you kind of have to rely on the reputation of the manufacturers and just be able to say, like, there's no reason for me to sign an NDA about a tote bag. Truthfully, 20 people are going to contact us this week about making them a tote bag.
Right.
And the other thing that we've seen is a lot of simultaneous inspiration. Lots of people coming up with the same idea on different sides of the country, which is like a totally rational evolution of whatever's trending at the moment.
Yeah. What did you call it? Simultaneous
inspiration?
Simultaneous inspiration. We're copywriting that right now.
Yeah.
It is true, though. I mean, unless you have a utility patent on a product, a very specific product, the NDA is a moot point anyway, and you've more than likely spent money with a lawyer or LegalZoom or something to try to defend something that ultimately, the moment you put it on the market, is your manufacturer probably isn't the problem. It's the number one consumer base. It's your number one fan is the one who's going to take it apart and try to make it their own pattern or whatever. It's rarely, from our standpoint, it's rarely the manufacturer. We operate in a very, very different, like super visible way, ethical way versus shops that just aren't what we are. And there are plenty of shops that are like ours, I believe. There's there's not a ton. It's definitely weighted toward the other end. But I mean, without a true utility patent, it's really quite difficult to defend an NDA anyway. And an NDA is virtually undefendable unless you're Nike, to be truthful.
Okay, so I said that we wouldn't really sign NDAs, but also like there's this whole product development process that we generally have to go through before we can come up with true costing on something. And maybe explaining that is a little bit more information about Spooltown and how we work, because not everybody works this way. You can go to some shops and they will say, oh, I'll charge you $18 to make that thing. And then maybe you'll have 100 of those things made. And then the next time you go to make them, the shop says, actually, it's going to be $32. And a lot of that is because they hadn't figured out really what was involved in making that one item to begin with. So for us, we start with taking a look at whatever your idea is. Maybe it's something you're already manufacturing, or it's just an idea that you have. And then we do product development to come up with a pattern for that item, a digital pattern that we can use on our robotic table. We come up with an order of operations. We come up with a bill of materials that lays out everything that you need to make that. And then we sew a couple, or sometimes one, usually multiple iterations of that given thing. We time every step of that process, and we go through what it means to really make that product. And we do revisions that we need to make it work on our end. And then at the end of that, we have an accurate sense of how long it's going to take us to make this, what it requires on our end, which stores we're going to need, and what kind of labor costs are involved in that. And then that's the point at which we can say, okay, here's the true cost that we know we're going to charge you for these, and we're going to be able to continue charging you this amount. On an ongoing basis, so that you can make your costing appropriate to the labor that's involved in making it.
Yeah, which is atypical. You know, you can get a sample made out of LA in a heartbeat if you like, but I think it's a different process than what we offer.
Oh, and you can order a container of something from China, sight unseen, but what you get at the end is likely to be very different than what your expectations are. And our whole deal is that we try and make like a very specific and rigorous quality standard. And so that involves lots of transparency and communication throughout that whole process to kind of involve people in it and make sure that at the end, what you're getting is exactly what you expected.
Exactly. Thank you. Okay, quickly before we go on to the next question, just a reminder that you can ask your own questions of Sara and Dana for the end by clicking on the Ask a Question button. And do remember to take our poll if you haven't already. Okay, so for those makers that do come into you and say, okay, I need you to manufacture these things for me, what is the single biggest growing pain, if there is one, that you've seen these makers go through during that process?
Cash flow. I mean, I think it's always cash flow. It's a lot of money to lay out at the beginning to buy. You know, maybe you've been buying materials on bolts, and we require them to come on rolls. So you're no longer buying 10 yards or 12 yards at a time to make your production run of, say, 40 units or 50 units. And I then bump us up to buy 100 yards at a time. And then there's the hardware and the webbing and the this and the that, plus just the sheer labor costs. I think it's cash flow. It's managing cash flow, which then ties into probably another question that you have, and that's something that's often quite tricky for people to work through, and that's the fact that the product needs to be priced appropriately so that you can actually assume the cost of an outside source making your product, because it's not going to be the same. It's going to cost more than likely. So I would say cash flow is the hardest that we see. And also just honestly being able to let go of the design process and the actual making process enough, and trusting that what you're going to get is a top quality product back when it's completely outside of your hands, out, not even your house or your shop or anything. You can't see it happening. So that's a big hurdle for people too. It's just to relinquish that control.
Yeah, especially if they're used to doing it all by themselves and they have total and utter control over their quality.
Hard. Yeah.
It's a lot to let go of. I know a lot of makers are self-identified control freaks.
Of course. Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
And I mean, I can say that's how, well, I can't speak for you. That's how I got into this. I'm a self-identified control freak too. You know, it's part of the thing that is a really interesting challenge to me about running this business is that we're able to frequently make large runs of things for designers on products that we've never made before, and to be able to do them without screwing up 500 of these or whatever it is. And that to me is, it's a really interesting game of just figuring out all the moving pieces to get things to line up perfectly so that in the end you come out with this great product and everybody's happy about the whole way that happened.
Yeah. So let's dive a little deeper into the pricing conversation. So I know, again, in conversations we've had in the past, when I visited the shop, pricing can be an issue, especially for somebody looking to outsource. What are some of the things that you've seen happen? Like, I would love for you to talk a little bit about what you've observed in the handmade community and with the Etsy economy and things like that, that in some ways make your jobs harder or make it harder for a maker to make that leap into growth. Yeah.
We have a love-hate relationship with Etsy. I think that it has...
Full disclaimer.
Totally. I think that it is... it's been really great in a lot of ways. It's given so much exposure to people who are making things themselves. It has, made wholesalers find makers that they never would have found otherwise. There are lots of things that are really great about it. But the trouble, as we've seen, is that downside is that there's so much price competition in the Etsy community, and there's this feeling that I need to offer this product cheaper than somebody else who's making something similar, and people who are making things in their own houses are not accounting for the overall overhead of doing that. And so because they're not accounting for what it would take to rent a studio space and buy an industrial sewing machine and hire people and pay payroll taxes for them and all of that, then it can discount the overall cost of their product and make it so that it becomes impossible later for them to outsource manufacturing because they've set up a false price expectation of what this item should cost. And the reality is, like, you can only charge that much for it if you individually are the one buying the material and sewing every single one of these things, and if the volume can never grow to outpace that. So I lost my train of thought.
No, it's totally right. I mean, you can be the one to do all of those bits and pieces all the way through, and you account for, like, say it's a $40 product, right? But it takes you 6 hours to sew it. By the time you include the materials, the machine, everything else, you get down to it, you've made like 60 cents an hour, if you're lucky. We've done the math with folks before that have come in, and literally you get down to the end and you're like, well, you're averaging about 12 cents an hour. So you can't tell if that's really what your end goal was with these things. Like, it's tricky, and Etsy does drive wholesalers to those people, but those people are getting those wholesale accounts because at the end of the day, it's a $40 bag that probably should be close to like a $120 retail point. I mean, it's like half or a third of what it should be. And we can't compete with that. And so what ends up happening is someone comes in and we say, this is a beautiful bag and we can totally make this for you, but it's going to cost you $45 cut and sew labor here. Says nothing about actual leather, all the material, getting it all here, all of it, just cut and sew. And so quickly we just have these enormous deltas between what's been happening of an individual making it on their own to the actual cost of outsourcing it. And even if you go to a cheaper shop, we're never going to be the cheapest shop, but at the end of the day, even if we're middle range, the price point has been set. Consumer base expects that price point, and the wholesaler does. So it's like this total catch-22. It's like, it's awesome. You can sell 1,000 of them at that price point, and no possible way can you have them made. So we definitely have been huge critiquers of Etsy for all of those reasons, because I think it does set people up to compete against each other in a fairly unhealthy way. works great for some products for sure, but the pricing structure just is forced to a place where it's not sustainable.
And I think there's some good nuggets in there, that are important advice for people who make things themselves. And a lot of this we already know. We are all makers in our own right. We like to figure out how to do things and make them. And we really believe that we should buy fewer of things, but we should give a shit about the things that we buy. And I think that it's important that we take that value system and philosophy and translate it to our own businesses as well. The people who are buying our own items that we make, they should be people who truly value the work that goes into making those things, which means you usually have to charge a higher price for them. And yes, it means you're going to have fewer customers, but it might also mean that you can make a sustainable business out of it. Yeah. So I feel like that's the lesson. The lesson really is that, or the advice that I would give people is that you need to make sure that you're valuing the products that you're making appropriately so that you can make a sustainable business out of it if that's what you want to do. And if you just want to do is craft on your own and sell those things on Etsy, I say, yes, go for that. Don't know that may make it difficult to make a sustainable business or impossible.
There's just, it's what's happening in the comments right now, right? It's like, there's the overhead cost, there's the individual labor, there's the machines, the materials. Like that list is long. It's really long if you really, really go through that entire process of what it is. And it's not cheap, and it adds up fast, and it's horrifying how quickly it adds up.
Sure. Yeah. I think that's so useful, and that's some good tough love for people to really dig into and figure out if that, what their actual goals are for their business, what they envision their production looking like in their sweet spot, and then adjust accordingly to get there. And that's something that that Sharon and I try to help people do a lot, is really understand what it's going to take to get to where they want to go.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm curious, you've built kind of this brand around your facility. You have some core values that you're holding to. You're not you're not the lowest value option out there. You have some standards around how you do product development. Has that attracted a certain type of client that you like working with? And what is that type of client? And I would love to know, do you have shared values? Is there, how does that all affect your clientele?
When someone reaches out to Spooltown to see if we will do cut and sew, whatever variety for them, right? I feel the first, at least these days, we've kind of traded back and forth, but these days I'm the first wall of it comes to my inbox. And if in the first 2 or 3 emails back and forth, if the person says to me, I know that I can have this product made in China for $5, that's a pretty clear indicator that our values do not line up. And I say to them, and go and do it for $5 somewhere else, because it's not going to happen here. It's just not. Our current client base are over the 6-7 years that we've been doing it, 7 years, which is crazy, but 7 years.
What?
Anyway, that's all these gray hairs. That's where they came from. They're all Sara's fault. You see this?
I did those.
The client base has definitely shifted over time, and it's as kind of our systems have improved and processes have become in place. And frankly, we've just gotten bigger, more machines, more people, and we've streamlined our processes. The clients have a tendency to kind of ebb and flow with us. And hopefully what we are doing is, as their business is growing up and maxing out in volume, hopefully we're just matching them in our growth pattern. The clients that we work with absolutely match our value system, or else they wouldn't be willing to pay what they pay, just like we wouldn't be willing to pay what we pay our employees. I don't know what else to say about that.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think that in the last 7 years, the clients that have come to us have morphed quite a bit. And that's been an interesting changing process to go through that and see what that looks like. As our shop has grown, our clients have changed. But I do think that we can't really work with super value shoppers, people who are trying to get the absolute cheapest thing, as Dana said. And now we've grown to a point where we need bigger projects to keep our staff busy and to avoid tons and tons of admin overhead of managing teeny tiny little projects. So I will say in the beginning, we're able to do much smaller runs than we're able to do now. And now we're looking for, still totally reasonable volumes in terms of factory MOQs, but we're looking for minimums that are 100 units of something, but not 20 anymore. Those days have really
They're gone.
Gone.
Yeah.
We tried that for a couple of years, and it was like it was a serious struggle. I don't honestly believe you can run an operation like that if you have a factory, with space you have to pay for and people.
Mm-hmm.
It's too much management.
Yeah, so that's the perfect segue into my final question for you, which is, what is the biggest growing pain or lesson you've learned over the last 7 years as the owners of this business, building it up from the ground up?
There's so many to choose from. So many lessons, Isaac.
So many lessons. I don't know. I mean, I think I beat my head against the wall for a lot of years trying to make kind of a no minimum environment happen, and trying to work with clients who were really too small to be considering outside manufacturing. And that was kind of a surprise to me, that I really don't think that tiny volume moment is really possible. That feels like a big learning lesson for me.
Yeah, and I mean, I think the hard part for me is the contained growth aspect. There's my inbox is full of people who have great ideas that are actually viable, but to weed through those and figure out who has the product that is going to match in the production gap that we have at any given time. I could say yes to every single thing that came through the inbox, and we could make it. That is never a question. Every once in a while, there's something that's just like, you need a seam sealer and that's way too technical, or that's actually apparel. Like, there's that kind of stuff that happens. But if I said yes to everything that came in through the door, I would flood our production environment. And at the end of the day, we have made very clear strides and very clear goals that are around contained growth. Because if you go too big too soon, it just blows out and mushrooms out from underneath you. So I think that's been my huge learning lesson, is who do you add in at the right time with the right product for what you've already got going on. We live and die by our production calendar, and all it takes is one product to be misaligned or a client to be misaligned, and it's a little bit of a wreck.
Yeah. And I think that kind of goes back to what you were saying, where you're often talking to people who make things on their own and asking them to consider their business goals and what it is that they want out of their business. I think for us, we've learned over the last years, like, we have to do the same thing. We cannot just respond to all the inquiries that come our way. We have to think about what kind of business it is that we want to run. Like, I don't want to be the next American Apparel. I don't want to have a zillion employees whose names I don't know, who, I may or may not care about working in
sexually harassing.
That situation was crazy. And, I like our small shop. I like this kind of attitude and the atmosphere that we have, where we all ask each other about each other's weekends, and we like each other. We want to go have a beer with each other at the end of the day. We can stop our shop in the middle of the summer, sit outside and have a barbecue. That feels way more like the business that I want to run. And so I think that has made us need to make some difficult choices about what kind of clients we want to take, or what we want our business to look like based on that. Turns out you can't make everybody happy.
It's true.
It is true.
It's life.
Okay, well, that wraps up the questions for me. I don't see any questions from the audience, which means that I asked all the right questions. I feel good. But I do want to recap our poll real quick, because I'm curious to see where our audience is falling in the spectrum of considering manufacturing. We had a couple of people who, yes, do want to pursue outsourcing part of their manufacturing. I see people voting right now. The numbers are changing.
It's happening.
Most of the audience, about half the audience, is on the fence about whether they want to or not. So I hope that this was helpful in understanding a little bit more about what it takes to make that leap, and to dive into outsourcing some production, some or all of your production. And we had one person who said that they would prefer to work with production help in-house. And I think the important thing for me is that these types of conversations that we just had can be helpful for people who want to do production in-house too, because you're still talking about labor. We talked about payroll taxes being factored in. A lot of people, when they are factoring an hourly wage into their prices, aren't actually factoring in the overhead that comes with payroll and bookkeeping and taxes and things like that. So I hope that this was helpful for everyone.
Can I say something about that?
Yeah.
I know how it is in a lot of places, but I know in Portland there's a Small Business Development Commission, SBDC, you don't have to seek help from somebody that has manufacturing experience, and you'll never find anybody that has handbag manufacturing experience in the way that you're doing. Find whatever the local community is of manufacturers, right? I guarantee you there's a small industrial platform in every single city, one way or the other. And whether you have one employee that you're looking at or you're adding 10, at the end of the day, whatever, they can help. Right. So they'll help you figure out the payroll taxes or whatever. And I definitely do not need to sit here and say everybody should go to an outside manufacturer. No. Just know, like, you have absolutely the ability to set it up within your own house. It just requires more of you'll be less of a designer and you'll be more of a factory owner. And that is always a consideration. If you think that it's only going to be design in for you, you have to then hire somebody to manage all the rest of it. For maybe not at the beginning, but really quickly. All it's 2 employees, and suddenly, like, it's a time suck. So find whatever your SBDC is in the local area, and they'll help you set up all of that back end stuff, because it's not at all worth the pitfall of discovering a year down the road that you haven't been paying payroll taxes. It's a huge hiccup. So there's help. You just got to find it.
Great. So tell us where our audience can find you. What's your website is spooltown.com. Is that correct?
Yep.
True. Yeah.
Boom. And you're on Instagram?
We are on Instagram if you want to see lots of photos of trash. I love taking photos of all of our fabric scraps that we have around, and that's where a lot of our Instagram inspiration comes from, because we work with such cool fabrics all the time. It's really fun, I think. And
you have 2 adorable shop dogs.
Oh, yeah. Also, yeah. One of them sleeping next to a heater right now. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Sara and Dana, for joining us for YH.
Yeah, of course.
That wraps us up for today. We will be back next week with, let's see, what is our subject for next week? The customer isn't always right.
That's so fun.
Boy, do we have some stories to share with you about that. So if you are registered for today, you are registered for the rest of the month. You will just come right back to the same link and to the next session. If you would like to watch the replay, that's going to pop up just a few seconds after we conclude here. And if you want to watch last week's, go up to the schedule button at the top left of the screen. Click on that and you'll see all the sessions for the month. I am Isaac Watson, co-director of Academy of Handmade. We're happy to have you here. Thanks for joining us, and we will catch you next week. Bye, everybody.